Yo, what's good chat? Prodium Blake here, back with another beat breakdown. Today I wanna show you all how I made the beat to Overdose by Badboymyko. If you're new to the channel, make sure you leave a sub and also make sure to watch the other beat breakdown series I did. And without wasting further of your time, let's jump straight into FL Studio. Here in FL Studio, this is how the project looks like. I'm gonna break down everything on how I started from the melody to the drum pattern, to the arrangement, then to the mixing of the beat. So make sure you watch up to the end. And yeah, let's begin. So this is how the melody sounds like without all of the drums. It was, remember, I just kept it simple as I was going for that dark, how do they call it? I was going for that dark orchestral feeling. Yeah, so this is how the melody sounds like first. Yeah, nothing too crazy. It was just a simple piano orchestral melody. So this is how I made the melody. Normally I put my arrangements on two different patterns. I normally have the main pattern, which is where now I arrange the beat. Yeah, so that was the melody. Nothing too hard, just a simple piano and some orchestral elements. So here is how I'll take you through how I made the melody too. This is how the melody arrangement looks like. So first thing I started with was this pad. I think it was a phrase from a certain drum kit. Yeah, so this is how the reverse pad sounds like. So originally, before consolidating this pad, it was in D sharp. I tuned it a little bit down to B because, you know, if you want perfect dark trap beats, I will suggest you use either the scale of G, A, or B. Those are the ones I know, so you can try them yourself, or if you know others, let me know in the comments. So the next thing I went ahead and added after the pad was just this low piano. Nothing too crazy, and this was the preset I used. I used Addictive Keys, the Studio Grand. This was the Studio Grand preset, and this is what it sounds like together with the pad. Yes, this is how it sounds like. Yeah, just a simple pattern. Then the next thing I went ahead and did, first of all, I consolidated everything to save on my CPU. Producers understand that. So the next thing I went ahead and did was add this top line piano. Yeah, again I used Addictive Keys but a different preset. So I used Addictive Keys, the modern upright piano. Yeah, and this is what it sounds like together with the pad and the low key. This is how it sounds like. Yeah, so another tip I want to tell you people is when you're making these dark beats, I've already given you the scales I use, but you can also use either the Lydian scale in any key. You can either use the Lydian scale or the Phrygian scale or just the minor. I think it's called minor harmonic. So yeah, those were the two elements together. Then the next thing I went ahead and did was add this violin. Yeah, so this was the violin I used. It was just an SRX orchestra, the VLN and VCL, but I remember I turned off this number one here because it was giving it that chorus effect. Then I went ahead and turned off the MFX to the chorus and the reverb. I turned everything off because I wanted the raw sound that I will process later. And yeah, so this is how the violin sounds like with the rest of the elements. Yeah, So again, the next thing I went ahead and did was add another violin, and this I processed it differently. What I did was, normally without what I did here, this is how it looked like. I just took the other pattern, then I half timed it. I went ahead and half timed it manually because I didn't want to use any plugin to give that robotic sound, so I went and did it manually. And the original pattern looked like this. For those of you who are using FL Studio and you don't know, there's always this arrow here. You can use it to half time your melodies. So the original pattern was like this. I'm gonna solo it out. Yeah, it was the other pattern, but I changed a little bit of the notes, like this E from E6 here to E7 here. Then this one too, it was supposed to be here on B, but I put it on E and it clashed with this one, so I had to take this one a little bit an octave up. Then after doing all of that and half timing the melody, this was how the phrase now sounded like. Yeah, so that's how it sounded like. Let me put it in context with the other melody so that you get it. Yeah, so this is how it sounded like. Yeah, so that was how the second violin sounded like. Then the last thing I did was add this phrase again. I think it was the same one from Synth Palace, but it was just a slide. Yeah, I added. This is how it sounds like. It was actually not a phrase, it was a drone. Yeah, I've just heard it, then I remembered it was a drone. Yeah, that's how it sounds like. So as I told you, I was going for that orchestral feeling, and yeah, those were the elements I went for. And now after that, after consolidating each and every of the melody like you see here, I then went ahead and dragged them back to the main arrangement. Yeah, so for the effects, this is what I did. I first of all, normally I route all of my instruments to one track so that I can apply the same processing, and still if I feel like I need to add a particular thing to a particular element, it still has its own track, so it also saves me time and saves me the creative process, if you get it. I routed everything, as you can see, to my to this melody preset. Yeah, and these were the effects. So first of all, just to cut down the lows here, then the next thing I went ahead and did was add this compressor here, just to give an even sound, because if you hear the raw version of it, you can feel the melody has some fluctuating sound. So the compressor just puts everything on one line. Then the last thing I did was just add a side chain so that I could side chain the 808 to the melody. Yeah, that was all I did. And now I'll go through what I did with the drums. So for the first thing I went ahead and started with for the drums was this 808, you know, just a simple 808. I used an 808 from my upcoming kit. It's not yet released, but if you want a piece of it, I'll leave a link on the description. You can go check it out, or maybe pre-order. If the pre-order page will be up by the time I'll be uploading this video, you can go ahead and pre-order. So it was my short spins from my kit, and this is what it sounds like. Yeah, just a simple drum pattern again. Then after that, the next thing I went ahead and did was add this hi-hat too, and this was how the pattern sounded like. Yeah, again, just a simple drum pattern as always. Then the next thing I did was add this percussion. Yeah, it wasn't a percussion, it was a rim again from my drum kit. Oh, my drum kit's name will be called Cheat Code Drum Kit. So if you need it, or if you like the sounds you're hearing, you can DM me or just click the link I'll leave down there so that you can either get the kit on pre-order or just wait till I make the announcement of when I'll drop it. So this was the rim now, and I think I layered it. Yeah, that was a simple rim. Yeah, that was the rim. Then the next thing I went ahead and added was this Trapaholic snare, just for the snare rolls. This one I didn't use it, I didn't get it from my kit, but yeah, you can get the same snare on other kits. Yeah, so that was the roll there. Then the next thing I went ahead and added was just a simple open hat pattern. I put it on one place here just to accentuate, and this is what it sounds like. Yeah, nothing too crazy. Then the last thing I added was now another different open hat. Yeah, and this was just to accentuate now the 808s, and this is what it sounds like. Yeah, nothing too crazy again. And now for all of the drums together, this is what the drums sounded like. Yeah, so that was how the drum sounded like. Then now for the arrangement, I just used a simple trap arrangement pattern, which is we have 16 bars for the intro, then we have again we have another 16 bars for the chorus, then now we go into the verse, another 16 bars. So I was just putting 16 bars on every section. Yeah, and that's what it sounded like. So for the drums, this was the processing I did for the drums. For the hi-hat, didn't put anything on it because it sounded fine on itself. For the rim, again, never put anything on it. For the snare and the open hat, I used this percussion preset. I think it was from LJS drum kit, which has a reverb in the beginning. There's an EQ here too, there's delay, and then there's panomatic on a fast speed. The next thing I did was I added this open hat, which I put it in mono here. You can use this knob here so that it sounded like in the middle, since it was the one accentuating the 808, and the 808 normally sits in the middle. So I wanted the hat also to sit in the middle with the 808. So that was the one of the processing I put in. I first made sure it's in mono, then I went ahead and put this reverb, then I also went ahead and put an EQ. You can copy the curve I used. I just took off the low ends, made sure I touched a little bit of the mids, ducked if you're an audio engineer, you know this is where the S is, that sharp sound, this band 6. So I also turned it down, left everything else in neutral. So another thing I also did was for the rim, I put it in mono too, since it was a snare and it was standing on its own. I also put it in mono so that it could hit the same as the 808. Yeah, and really that was all I did for the beat, and together this is how the beat sounds like up to this point. Yeah, so if you made it this far, make sure you leave a like, make sure you leave a sub, so that you can get the motivation to keep on doing this. Otherwise, we'll see you in the next tutorial. Let me know which other of the tracks I have produced that you need you need me to break down, I'll leave a link to my playlist, my Spotify playlist, in the description too. Make sure you check it out, listen to what I've been doing or what I'm doing, and I'll really appreciate it. Peace.